wonderful Wednesday. All right. Looking at your study guide or other things that you have, what would be some things we know about society that he lives in, so far as time, location, aspects about it?
Technology is like really big.
Okay. And like popular, people focus on it, main priority. If we can write, there we go. So technology, and I realize I'm not writing complete complex compound sentences. So we got priority of technology, Nate.
Nobody really socializes with each other.
Okay. So lack of socialization. What anyone remember, like era, year-wise, what we're looking at roughly? And there was something we mentioned in the notes too. Is it 2025? No, further. 20. It's the 24th century. So that would be the 2300s. I think we talked about that when we started going over some stuff. So it would be the 2300s, which this would be pretty much around the same time that the short story we were looking at with the pedestrian takes place. And Clarice talks about her uncle, how he's suspicious for like walking around and he would get stopped by people, where it would seem that Bradbury is kind of connecting that idea with the short story, The Pedestrian, that we read earlier on in the year. A futuristic society, people are dependent upon technology. The types of technology certainly would seem to be the TV parlor walls, as well as, they call them the seashells. Of course, we would pretty much just look at those things as being earbuds for us. What was the D word that mentioned from our opening introductory notes? D word that we would align with our setting. This is a dystopic book. So the idea is that you have a bleak future, so it is a dystopia. So a bleak depiction of the future. This doesn't have to turn into a look at everything that is wrong with our society. I know we spent 3 days going over that Digital Nation documentary. In some ways, it would make it seem like Mr. Kane's going, you people are in a terrible era. We're all falling apart. You could argue that it's a terrible era and that we're all falling apart. But do you see any similarities between what he's portraying 24th century and what we have going on for us today? Why are you going here? Is that necessarily a bad thing, whether it be for us or for the book?
There's like, it's similar, but that's like in a way over exaggeration.
What's in the book?
Yeah.
How like?
Because like they only use technology and they don't socialize with anybody. Whereas like people now probably don't socialize as much because you can just text people.
It looks good for him. Why have to make him so, and Nate, like, there's nothing in here where they talk about like texting back and forth, because with like phones, that's not going to be the main priority. And I'm not trying to get in an argument with you about it. Where Clarice and even Montauk, to a certain degree, kind of think of socialization as having to be face-to-face, person-to-person. You would be arguing that technology still allows socialization to happen even if it's through technology, correct? Okay. Did you something too? The way you're looking at me now. What else? Similar to our society, not similar? Or other aspects besides just technology? Pardon?
They're government funding.
What do you mean?
Yeah, they're government. Yeah.
Well, we don't really know what the government's doing, besides planes are flying overhead, but that would be a difference between our world and theirs.
I said that
They censor knowledge of their government
Okay. So censorship is a issue in the book. You had a question where on the quiz on the back, Beatty said, according to Beatty, what has happened to books and information and articles and things like that? It was a true false question, I think, that you had. It has made people unhappy. From a content standpoint, what has happened to them? Okay, so like, and obviously books not being allowed at their point, but over the course of history, they all end up kind of saying the same thing, because it's creating people from being unhappy. It was causing people to be unhappy because of differences, and also from a length standpoint. And then they get to your question: what has happened to the literal size of the texts? They have gotten shorter and shorter, smaller and smaller. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. Government shutdown, being open, and things like that. Where do you get your news from?
Nowhere.
And I mean, we could get TV, in person, reading newspaper. Although reading newspaper probably doesn't happen as much. I think online is going to be the most common thing that folks would say. For a lot of folks, and again, me included, it could be Twitter headlines that you take a look at. So if you're running through like a social media app, or you're going through some kind of app that is streamlining the news, so you just like an Apple News or like a Google Newsstand or whatnot, generally, from a news standpoint, what do you start to get is little snippets of information, maybe like it could be 40 characters long, could be 40 words. But I do think that idea of us just getting little sound bites does kind of proves to be true in a lot of areas of today, where we don't try to get necessarily the whole story.
Her name's Beatty?
His captain's Beatty.
Yeah, I thought it was Betty.
No, Beatty. So Beatty, and think of the root word of Beatty, the way that it sounds. What would be the primary word that goes into the name Beatty? Bait. And you could think of bait as fishing bait, a lure, but from a verb standpoint, what does it mean to bait somebody? You're egging them on, you're luring them in, you're trying to trap them. And so Beatty, when it comes to the mechanical hound reacting to Guy, or when it comes to the conversation where, firemen get the itch every now and then that they want to read books, it's almost as if he's trying to bait Guy. We don't know why Monday, but I can think of a reason for Beatty, trying to bait Guy into admitting that he has the books or that he's trying to read them and things like that. So Captain Beatty, Clarice for the little girl, and then Millie, obviously for what his wife's name would be. If you want to go Captain Betty, hey, you can. But yeah, Beatty would be the sound for it. What do we know about this girl? And we don't have to be necessarily, what you have written for number 2, but what are things that we know about her? Got hit by a car.
She's a teenager.
Remember how old?
17. She knows about history.
Is her uncle the
Yeah.
He's not meant to be like literally the same person, but I would say he aligns with Leonard from the pedestrian story. He Bradbury writes pedestrian before this, so I would say pedestrian. He has another short story called The Fireman that would certainly tie in and lead into the book. So he would be pulling from some other ideas, but pedestrian, remember, takes place in Los Angeles. They talk about the McClellans coming from Chicago. So there are some slight differences with it, but I would be positive that he's thinking about the guy that he used for his pedestrian story as the basis for the uncle. Right. And so I think anyone who has read Bradbury would go, okay, yep, that's the pedestrian, at least based from him. Hit and run accident, which we know leads to her death. 17-year-old. What else? What would be some specific things about her character-wise? Well, people would term her as being crazy. Crazy in the sense that she's very different from others. Who's her source? pretty much her family. So knows history, knows things coming from her uncle. How many friends do you recall have died of hers, or kids that she knows that have died, like in the last year? I'm gonna go 24. She knows 10 kids have died, 6 have been shot, the rest were accidents, which is a little bit of foreshadowing of what happens for her in car accidents. Was it an accident with her death or not? That could kind of be a whole thing. But she knows about history. She's worried about the world. And she certainly tends to notice things with nature. So, Maddie, I think the other day was going off on her and dandelions, and who in the world's going to rub dandelions on their chin just find out if there's yellow on it and things like that. But she will do the thing with the dandelions. When she breaks up leaves, what does she think they smell like? There's a fragrant, there's a scent, cinnamon. She likes to tilt her head back and catch the raindrops as coming on. So as opposed to a foil for her would be Millie, who comes off as being a total robotic kind of character. She is someone who would, for us, would kind of seem to be a little bit more normal, but our normal for today is going to be crazy in their society. So this idea of her being crazy is meant to be purposely ironic, because for us, we would think of her as at least being maybe a little bit more artistic, but we wouldn't look at her as being absolutely crazy. She complains about abstract art in a museum. Everything is abstract. The one thing that she does like to do, listen to people talk, because that's where you get the socialization aspect that she thinks is missing so much.
Was she killed because she knows them? Like, is that like
The crappy answer is we don't know. The fact that Beatty knows about it certainly heightens some suspicion, because he says, people we've known about the McCullens for a while. We've known about this family for a while. They are the kind of people that you want to keep an eye on. Whether or not it's a total accident as to how she dies, we never get the answer. I do think that Bradbury wants us to think that it's a distinct possibility that it does happen, because then you have some all-knowing government that is able to do some things. But I mean, fireman's job, burn down houses, and if you have people like the lady, who later on in the chapter, so she doesn't want to leave, the woman down here, if she happens to die in the fire, oh well, we're not going to worry about it. So the idea that human life would be expendable certainly isn't going to be a concern for them. And if you have kids shooting each other or dying in hit-and-run accidents, you're not really trying to stop, all these things from happening.
We know it's not assassinations. What if they're like straight up? What if they're like?
Well, we don't have anything to kind of pull from it at that point. Now, the closest thing that you could get to it, though, Brendan, with question number 3, why do you think the mechanical hound has been programmed to react to Montauk? And some of you were putting this down as foreshadowing what's happening at the end of the chapter.
Well, I said, like, one man has, like, an enemy at the heart, and the enemy, like, programs it to do with it.
And we don't know this 100%, but who would be a potential enemy or adversary of his at the fire station? It's going to be Captain Beatty.
Wait, is Beatty the dog?
Yes. You could just say that to me. I know, but then he called the dog that earlier.
No, the dog is just the mechanical hound. So it's not Rex or any kind of little comet name like that. And we don't know if Captain Beatty would be the one behind it. But again, as we said, the fact that his name has that reference to baiting Guy into doing things, it is certainly possible that he could be the one who has programmed the hound. Because what does the hound do? Sniffs out books. Beatty certainly seems to know that he does have some books and all that kind of access to information. So the idea that he could be behind it would make perfect sense. Brendan, you threw out like assassination. This is an assassination happening, but the idea that if you have a guess, if you have speculation that something illegal is going on, they would be people, it seems like they are going to pounce on it as soon as they possibly can. And once they're looking at the books at the end of the of chapter, you hear that scratching taking place. The hound is coming right after him. At least kind of taking a look for it. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Question 4. What's the effect on Montauk? For the woman willing to die in the house. You know what the follow-up question has to be. What's the revelation?
That like maybe the books aren't that bad. Maybe considering that girl like herself.
If a person is willing to die for a cause, what do we call that? A martyr. So in some ways, she kind of becomes a more sacred character than just simply a woman dying in the fire.
Maybe she survived.
I realize she has nothing to do with the question. What would be a good word to describe Millie? As the way that she acts, the way that she carries herself. Uncaring, self-absorbed. I think a good word to go along with those, I think a good word for Millie is that she comes across as being very robotic. She's absorbed with her technology. She doesn't really seem to have any feeling. Where did her and Guy meet? They don't know. So there doesn't seem to be kind of like any kind of memory feeling with her. The woman, on the other hand, as opposed to being robotic, comes across as being very human. So the revelation that books may not be bad, that they could be an important part of what it means to be human, to have those human desires of information, of knowledge, of ideas, of creativity, that she wants to be kind of a martyr for humanity as opposed to becoming more of a robotic figure that you have with Millie. One part with Millie that folks seem to kind of get stuck on. Why do the quote-unquote paramedics have to come and see her in the beginning? She takes too many sleeping pills. She certainly doesn't seem to remember it and talks about, did we watch TV, did we have a wild party, all that kind of stuff from the night before. She has no memory, no recollection of what would happen. But she has overdosed on pills. And from what the quote-unquote paramedics say, who come across more as like plumbers who visit rather than medical people, this is something that happens 9 or 10 times a night. The assumption would be that whether or not she realizes that she has attempted to commit suicide. So there's some aspect about her life that is not worth living, that technology does not give her, that apparently if you're someone like Millie or the woman in the house, it does provide.
What if like every night she discovers she takes a bunch of sleeping pills and then she wakes up and
You can argue that like she's not, because I mean, by taking all the blood out, some folks would argue that you're not even like the same person at that point. I mean, we do blood treatment, like we do blood treatment, but they literally take out all the blood, all new blood back into her. Some folks are looking at it as being more like a reprogramming, that kind of takes place. That she's physically there, but she's not